how you're bringing the military technology to the commercial side. And I think that this leader follower thing's a good example to dive in, kind of a compare contrast, right? So the way you describe it, of someone driving with a convoy of vehicles, but behind it, very similar to the way that Class 8 trucks, commercial platooning or convoying is presented, right? Where it's a similar model, but as I understand it, obviously the boundary conditions are very different on the roads that or lack of roads that you're operating on, and then also kind of the optimal following distance and all this type of stuff. Could you speak, I guess, kind of at the application level, how are those similar and how are they remarkably different?
Sure. So you're definitely correct. In the kind of Class 8 space, there's been a lot of talk of platooning. Platooning, typically when people are talking about it, is really talked about like close headway and trying to like optimize fuel efficiency by drafting and using other techniques like that. We're not exactly doing that on the military side. So we are obviously doing a very similar type of capability. We have a series of vehicles that are trying to follow the same path, but they're not necessarily trying to be driving, a foot away from each other. We have, just like you might be driving on the highway, we have headway time, we have fixed gap distances, because sometimes the mission needs that.
Yeah, but, I mean, if the first truck hits a mine, you don't want everyone to hit
exactly.
a mine, right?
And one of the big things that's important on the military side, and honestly has a lot of applications to the commercial side as well, is you have to be very, very accurate in following that leader's path, because you're right. If you have basically a convoy that's clearing a route and they know that this route is safe, but every vehicle is kind of driving a little bit in a different location, then you have a much greater chance of accidentally setting off an IED or something like that. Mm-hmm. So they are very tight on the tolerances that you want to be following, and you need to be very accurate in terms of basically following in the tire tracks of the leader that was ultimate leader, that manually driven vehicle that's proving that path for you. But you're right, there are some differences. Obviously, the military doesn't have some of the luxuries that the commercial market has. We're not driving all the time on nice paved marked roads. We're often driving on secondary roads or trails. They're not necessarily nice and flat. They're not, you're going to have vegetation, tree canopy, things that are going to block and degrade your GPS signal. You can't count. In fact, we don't have any ability to use HD maps or a priori information. So you can't go out and collect the routes that you're going to run. You have to be able to turn the trucks on and go wherever is needed in the mission. So all of that we've been working on for the government for so many years, all these really hard problems and edge cases, I think really inform how we approach some of the commercial markets as well, because all of that is useful, because, there are a lot of lanes that have road markings on them, and then sometimes there aren't.
Yeah.
And what do you do when you can't see the lane markings anymore? And there's a lot of areas that have good open skies, and there are other areas that don't. When you are going to have a GPS outage for whatever reason, you need to be able to continue along your driving. You can't just pull over on the side of the highway, or at least you don't want to pull over on the side of the highway. You'd like to be able to continue. And there's a lot of applications for trucking, for example, that are running in areas that look a lot like what the military runs in. So we have a partnership with FP Innovations, who is a nonprofit in the Canadian forestry industry, and they're trying to, seek technologies that help that industry as a totality. And one of the ones they're interested in is leader follower, because, it's harsh environments, it's access roads that aren't nice paved roads. There's tons of tree canopy. Obviously, you're in the forest. And it's, kind of dangerous for the human drivers that are driving there. So they want to be able to bring automation there. And there's not a lot of other autonomous vehicle companies that have the background that we do in off-road and all of these edge cases that are not easy to solve. Not that any autonomy is easy, but they're definitely a challenge, and we've been working on it for about 20 years. So we think we have some good technology there to overcome some of those challenges.